The conversation about AI generation has been talked to ad nauseum at this point, but I do want to make my own points known. As an artist, I don't think I've heard other artists talk about it from this perspective. Of course, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that I'm not a fan of AI generation. I'm an illustrator and an artist. When the technology first hit the market, I won't pretend I didn't experiment with it initially, before learning where its sources were from, the entire uncensored internet. I'm not going to sit here and argue with the ethics committee about whether or not AI-generated images constitute as art because its very existence, controversy, and intentions make it art. That's not the argument here, and it shouldn't be, because the discussion of what is and is not art has been going on for so long now as each generation is critical of the next that the conversation itself has become an art form. We're here to talk about copyright laws, entertainment strikes, compensation, and the cost of generative AI, the markets it's influencing, and how it can be used more wisely if it isn't going anywhere. So while the technology is being advertised as being brand new, machine learning has been around for decades. Heck, vocal augmentation of sound bites to create a new song or voice isn't anything new. The popular obvious one of Hatsune Miku, and before her, there was what we now like to call her grandfather, the IMB 7094, back in 1961. The song that was recorded that it sung was the song Daisy Bell. The vocals were programmed by John Kelly and Carol Lochbaum, and the accompaniment was programmed by Max Matthews. The utilization of taking vocal snippets of somebody talking or speaking or even creating new sounds that sound similar to percussive diction in computers, again, is nothing new. Machine AI learning has been around for quite a long time as well. Microsoft's Clippy could be considered AI looking back at it. Cleverbot, an infuriatingly funny conversationalist bot, was something I used to play with when I was younger. Now, Cleverbot was a non-generative AI of sorts, though it was not advertised as such. It is simply redefined now in modern times. You as the users would feed it responses in dialogue, and it would respond in turn, and its dataset grew the more people interacted with it. And the fun thing was that it was completely uncensored, so sometimes you'd roleplay with it, and sometimes you'd get into unintentional debates with it over which of you were the robot, the clever bot, or you as the user, because everybody who talked to it fed it about the same response of, "I'm not a robot, you are." So then it would give that response back, almost every single time. Artificial intelligence, as it was romanticized in fiction, specifically science fiction, was the idea of replacing synapses with wires and to create a true intelligent being from a machine. And that is not how AI functions today. To call it artificial intelligence is a little bit untrue, but that's the term that we've gone with for this type of technology. So if it's been around for years, then what makes this newer version of the technology so different and so polarizing? Put it simply, intent, cause, and consent. AI image generators, vocal generators, and so on weren't invented to help general consumers, even if it looks like they were on the outside. They've been funded by huge corporations and entities in order to cut out human labor to save money. That's what this comes down to. And that becomes a problem when the AI has its datasets trained on pre-existing data created by humans who did not consent to their data being used or unknowingly consented because of the fine print and user agreements. A lot of these artists, vocal actors, photographers, writers, notary publics, historians, and even privatized companies of news outlets, websites, publishers, and agencies did not agree to these terms. They were not compensated for their collective years of labor and education, and they're losing their jobs not to immigrants, not to people in other countries, and not to more educated individuals or people through DEI initiatives, but to machine learning that is completely dependent on those that came before it. It's a way to avoid paying people for their labor and attempt to bypass copyright laws. Let's think about this objectively. Let's say that I wanted to get a celebrity cameo of Jack Black or something for an animated feature. The last film that Jack Black was in that was an animated film gave him a payout of $5 million. That's not taking into consideration residuals. Now, a residuals payout contract is going to look different for different actors based on their accolades, their education, their experience, and payouts required to people that represent them, such as agencies and lawyers. But generally speaking, residuals are a percentage of sales or streams related to watch times, sale of DVDs, digital copies of the film, merchandise sales with their face on it, and so forth. So if somebody wanted to have Jack Black in their film but they didn't want to pay him because they can't afford $5 million, what's to stop them from generating something with his face on it? Or filling in background actors. Filling in background noise in a movie set. That's where the actor strikes earlier in previous years came in. SAG-AFTRA is the actors' union for films, video games, and voice acting. They went on strike in 2024, and while a lot of the rights they fought for they were able to obtain, AI is still a sticking point, and video game actors are still currently on strike because of it. Film and video game makers want to use AI-generated voiceover work so they do not have to pay actors residuals. And most actors do not gross the kind of funds that Jack Black does. Most actors are expected to live in California, which is one of the highest cost of living rates in the US, and the average actor, such as background actors or ensemble cast, get paid per gig, with little to no residuals based on the hierarchy of importance of roles in films. Actors, both in and outside of the film industry, have to work multiple jobs or wear multiple hats. Most voice actors learn storyboarding and animation. Most animators learn voice acting and fill odd job roles like Foley technician, costume design, makeup, camera crew assistants, miniatures, all to try and make a production keep going so the investors can keep continuing to line their pockets and be annoyingly pervasive in the world of art. So, taking your lowest ranking employees who cannot afford to live where you've expected them to live in order to work for you, and giving them the shaft so that you can save a little extra money, leaving them with no safety netting to take care of their bills or move someplace cheaper, is what most people with any sort of self-awareness would call getting scammed. So obviously, any actor dependent on those residual payouts who provided their faces and voices would want to continue to be compensated for that. That's not an insane thing to want. So of course, when companies try to pay them once to use their face and voice forever on other projects, people are going to take issue with that sign-over of their workers' rights. They're not going to do it. It applies to more than just acting. It applies to animation, to art, to writing, even to legal advice. Every single institution and job market is being overtaken by this, and nothing is being done to ensure that the people who are being thrown under the bus get compensation for their labor. In order for AI to coexist in these industries without extreme public backlash in terms of transparency, fairness, compensation, and rights, several things are going to have to change, and the unions and co-ops are going to have to discuss what to do next in all of this going forward. Personally, it's my opinion that if companies continue to refuse to stop using AI, then there needs to be a residuals contract in place for people who get trained on it, or provide their voice or their face for the AI to train on. That way they have consent beforehand to being trained on it, and there needs to be more transparency with the consumers about what's real and what's AI generated. Residual payouts need to continue so long as whoever agreed to it provided their face and their voices continue to be used. It cannot just be a company policy or a public statement. This needs to happen on a federal and world stage level. Let's talk about the real cost of AI. Now, AI generative companies aren't going to be transparent in how much electricity, water, and materials goes into maintaining their systems, servers, and how that affects the areas that they're located. They have chosen not to speak on these issues time and time again. But what we do know is that per query, the average AI program uses 6.9 to 8.9 wattage volts of electricity. That doesn't sound like a ton on the surface, but how many times a day do you Google something or use ChatGPT or any AI software? How about times you think you're just looking something average up and it turns out that programs like Facebook and Google are still using and pushing the AI generated answer first? Google handles close to 8.5 billion queries per day. If we take the average of 7.9 wattage volts and multiply that by 8.5 billion searches, that's 67,150,000,000 wattage volts of electricity per day. In kilowatts, this is 67,150,000 kilowatts per day. That's the average of a huge metropolitan city, including industrial businesses. If the national average of electricity consumption cost is $16.44 per kilowatt, then that comes out to about $11 million of electricity used per day by these larger corporations. That's $4 billion of electricity usage per year, which means that neighboring towns and homes in the same locations as these servers will more than likely have to deal with rolling blackouts, cutting back on lighting, not having access to air conditioning during hot summers and heat during cold winters in order to afford the little electricity that they will be able to have access to outside of what these companies will consume on average. There's also concerns about freshwater usage in their cooling systems to make sure that their servers and computers do not overheat when processing this much data. The water used in these systems is taken from areas where fresh water is scarce. According to Forbes magazine, a full 9 liters of water is evaporated per kilowatt used. So if 67,150,000 kilowatts are used per day by the average AI center, then the average water consumption of an AI center per day is 604,350,000 liters per day. That's enough water to fill 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools per day. Fresh water is hard to come by resource, so why don't these companies use salt water in their cooling systems? Well, they can't, because the salt would then lead to erosion of electronic parts and damage the machines beyond repair. So how do we keep all of this water from evaporating into the air and being directed back into the ocean? There must be a way to centralize the condensation, and if these companies were required to do so in order to save and reuse their resources, this would solve the water issue. But how about the electricity issue? Let's look at renewable energy sources. I'm going to go with windmills. So using windmills to further the electricity, it would require 365 windmills to power one AI server single-handedly. It would cost anywhere between $11 billion and $15 billion to construct these windmills if they went in that direction. However, that means the windmills would pay themselves off for these companies after 3 to 4 years maximum. The time will pass anyway, so why not make the investment into a power system that provides for these systems? There's other systems as well, such as solar panels and water and steam power and so on. I think that if AI is here to stay, then long-term solutions need to be here to stay as well, so that people do not die unnecessarily, and water and electricity is not taken from the mass of people who need it. Now, these estimates are just that, they're estimates. I won't pretend to know everything about water and electricity costs. We haven't even gone into the environmental costs of long-term Ethereum usage in alternative cooling systems, or how this could poison crops and animals and people in the same way that other forever chemicals like asbestos, lead, and microplastics have. Everything has long-term consequences, and oftentimes we do not think about that. You would think we would have learned our lesson by now, but these issues don't affect the higher class. And a lot of these people will be dead before they see the consequences of their actions, so they don't care. And you will not be able to get them to care if you try to appeal to their ethos alone. That's why you need to appeal to the business side of things, the cost-benefit analysis. If long-term investments into power grids, renewable energy, and a water condensation extraction method are implemented and proven to be more cost-effective than destroying the planet, then they will actually care about what the rest of us who are normal care about. And it is more cost-effective to think about the long-term benefits of renewable energy and its relationship to AI if AI is not going anywhere. Hopefully somebody important enough to care will do something about it. Now, speaking from the heart as an illustrator and as an artist, I don't like the use of AI. I don't consent to my works being used by it, and until the electricity usage of these companies is formally outlined and rectified with real solutions, and until a true compensation system is implemented, I'm not going to support it. Checks and balances need to be put into place for this industry, and until that's happened, I don't want anything to do with it, and I don't plan to willingly, knowingly use it. If you've made it this far, I hope this video helped you learn more about the cause and effects of this technology. I don't plan on commenting on the situation further until more news about it comes out that feels like elaboration could be useful from my end. Do you have research and notes pertaining to this you'd like to share? Do you feel like I've missed something, or that more could be elaborated on? Please comment below and contribute to the discussion. I'm curious to hear what you think or know pertaining to AI generation, APIs, and development of these technologies. If you have solutions, I'd love to hear them too. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.